All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our June episode of Eye on ESI. If you haven't joined us before, we'll let you know. The rules are basically we're going to take you through some data that Jared and his team puts together every month. We'll go through those, but this is an open forum. The idea is to have you ask questions, have you share your feedback. We want to hear from you because that helps us as we continue to build out content and have these conversations. I'm joined today by Jared Coseglia, CEO and founder of True Staffing Partners.
Hi, everybody.
And Mike Quartararo, president of ACEDS.
Slight correction to the rules. There are no rules.
There are no, well, we won't say that, but we won't say there are no rules. So this is fast-paced, 30 minutes. Again, ask questions. We want to hear from you. Give us your feedback. That's the most important part. But let's jump in. Jared, let's get to it.
Yeah, we've got some updates from last month, and the job market really does change from month to month for e-discovery professionals. So 92% of job seekers are accepting offers when they are extended, meaning we are not having a lot of people decline offers. In fact, we got our first decline in nearly 5 months for the first time, which is somewhat of a precursor maybe to something changing in the marketplace. That person wound up taking a different offer. We're going to come back to this statistic because it's a really important one. There was less job movement in May than in April. That doesn't mean there were less jobs. It just means there was less movement, and the speed of hire is still very slowly ticking a little bit slower. There were more layoffs in May than in April. We saw a lot more people in May who were victims of layoffs. And again, these layoffs are generally at the top of the market with people who are making between 150 and 200,000 or more a year in base compensation.
Jared, quick question for you on more layoffs in May. Was that law firms? Was that vendor? Where did we see those?
Vendors.
Perfect.
And Jared, we're seeing some layoff at firms, not, I don't want to say across the board, but you never really know. Some, there's stealth activities going on as well. Sure.
I haven't seen firms laying off e-discovery and lit support people in a way that I would call trending.
Okay.
What I would say is
they're very vague. They're very vague. They're like 20 lawyers and 20 legal personnel. They don't say what. It could be secretaries. It could be the guy in the mailroom.
It's not e-discovery people.
Okay.
Not in my opinion.
Okay.
It's vendors, right? I think some vendors made some changes. I think some vendors made some cuts to increase profitability for Q2 earnings and projected Q3 earnings. And that's why we're seeing people get laid off. We're still in a little bit of a limbo in a macroeconomic sense, right? We haven't moved out of, okay, there's no way we're going into a recession. Let's all start turning on the spending money button again. We're not quite there, but I think we're right around the corner as well.
Yeah. But we're at the same time, we're not headed for economic calamity.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I think some of those vendors,
knocking on wood.
Yeah, and some of those vendors are probably acquisition or looking at being acquired or looking at mergers. There's some things in the works that we know every so often we see some major acquisitions happening throughout a year.
Yeah, not to get on a huge tangent, but we did touch upon it in our conversation, and it's maybe an interesting perspective to share with all of our listeners because it's a unique one and something that when I brought it to the attention of some of the candidates who are out of work that are coming to us, they had an aha moment, which is if you're a service provider and you've been very traditionally, maybe for years and years and years, as you went from boutique to mid-size, been kind of Jack or Jill of all trades in the way that you delegate responsibilities and skill sets amongst your human capital ecosystem. And all of a sudden the company starts making changes to compartmentalizing those skill sets, meaning we have people who process, we have people who review, we have people who do analytics, but we want less people who are doing all of it in a level of autonomy that makes them a potential bottleneck. The reason why a company might do that is because they're preparing for acquisition. And it will be much easier to integrate a company that has compartmentalized resources from a human capital perspective into a larger vendor ecosystem than it will be to now acquire a company and then begin that process of transitioning from Jackson Drills of all trade, who handle everything and touch everything, to, okay, we are a industrial service provider of large scale and therefore compartmentalize things. That cost of transition affects the valuation of the company being acquired. And so dollars and cents are now affecting how people are structured prior to preparation for an acquisition.
It's all about the EBITDA.
If you're about to sell, yes. And not just EBITDA, but what are we going to have to spend to get them mixed into us? I just came back from an amazing conference where the whole dialogue was about how does privacy compliance impact valuations of corporations who are acquiring each other, and what measures in terms of human capital and or technological investment does the company being acquired want to make in order to increase the price of their valuation, because there is less risk involved post-acquisition. Sorry, that's a lot of fancy words, but hopefully that gives people some interesting perspective.
Yeah, and we had a comment from one of the awesome bloggers we know out there, and who is also a trainer, Mike McBride. He shares it costs less to hire 3 people with one compartmentalized skill each than 3 people who can do a number of skills.
1,000,000%. Mike's always been a genius, but well said.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. So 0% of our true contractors have been asked to convert to full-time employees in almost 90 days, over 90 days. So what does that signal, and why is that an important statistic that we wanted to share with everybody? Because this time last year, 3 out of 5 of our contractors were converting every month. People are not looking to spend money on full-time headcount the same way they're looking to spend money on contract resources. Again, I think that's going to change, but right now we're seeing people very comfortable in a contract modality, and at a macroeconomic level, that's absolutely the case. We have to wait for Q2 earnings reports to come out before we see that flip switch to FTE occur. And right now, contracting, very lucrative, very voluminous.
It does, Jared, though, suggest a little bit of a pullback, right? A caution, if you will.
Well, yes, we've been in a cautionary market since October, right? Yeah. Facebook laid off 10,000 people, and ever since then, everybody's been waiting to see when the shoe will drop. But Facebook stock went from 80 a share to nearly today 300. So guess who's going to have a very good Q2 earnings report and who's likely to turn on their hiring machine again in the 3rd and 4th quarter? And all the companies who followed suit with them when they fired will probably follow suit when they hire. And we're, following Zuckerberg is a litmus of a macroeconomic sense of the technology marketplace, which is driving a lot of macroeconomic decisions and driving a lot of potential litigation, which is also down these last 2 quarters compared to the previous 2 quarters. We talked about this in our prep call as well. Yeah. Maribel, you have the stats. Why don't we just share them with everybody now?
So I think in 2021, we saw over 5,000 e-discovery related cases. And this is thanks to Kelly Twigger of eDiscovery Assistant. And in 2022, it was under 4,000. So right now, it looks like they're a little over 2,000 cases for 2023. So which means we're halfway through June. So we may be a little above 4,000 cases, or around 4,000, or maybe a little less than 4,000 cases, depending on how the rest of the year goes.
Yeah, it ticks down.
I find that somewhat interesting, given that, and just from the published reports, I don't have any like evidence, other than the published reports, that a lot of the firms that are laying off on the corporate side because deal flow is down, not necessarily litigation. So interesting dynamics.
Yeah, there's no question that M&A is down. There's like no doubt about that. We could see it in the stock market on a daily level, right? Kava went public today and people went nuts. They finally had an IPO to get excited about in the stock market for the first time in like 9 months. So yeah, I mean, we're starting to see things change for, I think, the better for everybody, which also speaks to this next bullet point, which is that the top of the market is starting to open up, and we've had more.
What does that mean? What does that mean? Talk to me.
Yeah, it means that a lot of mid-sized law firms are now investing or reinvesting in leadership at a level that won't be enough compensation to attract somebody who's leading an AmLaw, top 100 established litigation support department, but it's perfect for what most senior PMs or team leads at law firms or vendors are looking for, which is an opportunity for somebody to step into leadership, who's maybe managing a team or a handful of people and is
So
now
maybe,
going to step
maybe
up.
a manager, possibly a director.
Correct. Manager, director level positions are opening up now at law firms. They're generally mid-sized law firms, not the big boys and girls. But they're also opening up in the vendor space. We're seeing kind of strategic account management roles that are very large managed service contracts that need layers of talent that are very sophisticated, not button pushing, complex M&A, second request, multi-district litigation, kind of work that command salaries that are base comps north of 200. We are seeing it open up.
Cool.
I know this is not a great question for this, but my DEI radar goes up when I start hearing, what about those top level, right, managerial director roles? And if we're seeing anything there as far as the diversity, right, in those positions.
I mean, look, I'll be very candid. It's not a pretty candor, but our corporate clientele has far more policy and mandate as it relates to the expectation of diverse candidates that are presented for roles coming from third-party agencies like mine versus our law firms, which is pretty nil, right? They just want to get the job filled.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's not that they don't care about it, but I think also law firms very much are requiring people to come into the office 3 days a week in major metropolitan cities. And I think they are cognizant about how difficult that alone will be, much less finding someone with the skill set and cultural fit that they're looking for. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be adding in diversity as a mandate, but they are not.
Yeah.
There is an equal amount of jobs open in May as in April, but we're seeing more job seekers become available. The volume of resumes that are just inbound coming into our organization is almost 5 times what it was in the month of January, but significantly higher than it was in the month of April. So there are more people coming to market, which is good news for hiring managers because it may mean more choices.
Question for you, going back to that one, is how many of those, and maybe this is something we start to look at, are people who are currently employed versus people who aren't employed?
Yes, we haven't broken that down yet, but I would say that it's pretty 50-50 in terms of the inbound, like, hey, I'm looking for a job. It's not as if it's all out of work people, although out of work people often come to us aggressively and first when they're out of work. But a lot of other job seekers that have been sitting in their jobs for a couple of years who made moves in late 20, early 2021, and are saying to themselves, I'm not so happy, maybe this wasn't the right move. And, yeah, I took a big payday, but this is not a good culture fit. Or, I took a job that was remote and now they're bringing me back into an office. And so I'm looking again. Those are some key things that are motivating people. But I'll still say what most ESI people are looking for is quality of life, vertical mobility into leadership, or more money.
Yeah. How many people do you see that actually go into a role that may take little less money for more quality of life or other benefits?
Plenty. It's about a 10 to 20% reduction that they're willing to take. For example, if someone's in an office 3 days a week, they may take a 10 to 20% base salary cut to go work at a job where they're 5 days a week remote from home. That's not an impossible reality. Not all of them are going to do that, but some will.
And I think that's the trade-off, right?
Well, look at this last bullet point. It depends on how you look at the glass, Mike, because the way that job seekers are looking at the glass is if I'm fully remote, and most of the jobs out there right now require some in-office capacity. Why? Because most of the remote jobs got filled over the last 2 years and people don't want to leave those jobs, generally speaking, unless there's a real motivating factor. 25% is the average base salary increase that candidates are telling us that they expect in order to even consider looking at a job that would move them from 5 days a week work from home to any amount of days, 2 to 3 days a week in an office hybrid. So if somebody's making $100,000 a year, they won't even have a conversation if it's not at 125 minimum.
Yeah.
Get them to start commuting back in. So Are people going to take the same amount of pay cut? Probably not. Are they going to expect significantly more to come in? Absolutely. And even that might not be enough.
Quick question, since
Yes.
we touched on M&A. We do have a question that came in. Do you have more details on how much the M&A work has fallen in the last year or two? I don't know if we have
I
that.
don't, but they're pretty easily found online. I mean, I'm a nerd who watches CNBC all day, every day, and you can feel it. I mean, I remember all the IPOs coming out in 21. I mean, you had like big companies, right? Like DoorDash, Airbnb, household names going public that have been household names long before they went public. We just haven't seen that.
Another question that came in is more and more large firms are announcing after Labor Day, they are mandating 4 days a week, which we're starting to see. I have friends in law firms who are like hating it. How will they get anyone to work there?
Well, there won't be as many other jobs available as there were over the last 2 years. So you won't have as many choices as a job seeker as you did when the pandemic adjustments were being made in the workforce. So you shouldn't be calculated in how you approach your job search. Don't assume that you're going to have the same experience out there that you had 2 years ago.
I think too that people need to do some, I don't want to say introspection because it's more of a team effort, I think, but teams need to better understand how to work remotely and recapture some of the benefits of in-person work, and there's ways to do that. There's creative ways to get around some of that. But if you're a leader, I think you need to think about how am I going to continue to manage my team, keep up morale and, continuity of business processes while remote when the firm is insisting that we come in. And I will say this too, and I don't know if we had this conversation with you, Jared, or if I had it with somebody else, I can't remember. I feel like there's a component of, and I'm losing my thought. So let's just move on. I'm sorry.
One more question. So we have an individual with a mid-sized firm is on the quest to hire complex civil litigators with practical e-discovery skills. What's that candidate pool look like and how do we find them? And I'm going to say this is the perfect place to find them because you've got ACEDS and True together.
Yeah, give us a call.
But
I can't give away all the secrets, guys.
Point of clarification, litigators meaning attorneys or?
I'm going to guess yes.
Okay. Because that's a different beast. Hiring attorneys is a different beast. They move differently. There's different, Jared, for instance, I don't know if you move attorneys, right?
Of course we move attorneys all day long. The challenge is they have different timelines, right, than these. Geography plays a much bigger role, but call me, I can give you the consultation you're looking for. I just want to go back to this idea of the force back to the office and touch upon one thing, and then we'll go really quickly through the stats. I think employers have to look at it a little bit differently because this is how candidates are looking at it. Whatever happened before the pandemic is ancient history. Forget those realities. We don't live in that world anymore. If you were a firm or a company that started allowing people to work remotely and things have been going fine, and now you're asking people to come back into the office with a mandated schedule of a certain amount of time a week, the problem isn't the coming back in. The problem is you're changing without giving me good reason. And the change without giving good reason is what employees are saying, you don't get it. This is just your way of controlling me, not improving the business. And this idea of, well, we have presence with a purpose. Well, you need to define what that purpose is. And if you've got a good reason for having people in the office Monday, Wednesday, Friday, let them know. Right. And this air of corporate entitlement, which is because I said so, it ain't gonna fly. We live in a new world order, guys. It ain't gonna fly. People don't want to work for people who treat their employees like that, especially who are in their 30s and 40s, where, you know,
Well,
eventually you've got, you know, a family to feed, right?
Yeah.
But in a
And-
world, Jared, where pretty much everybody is, you know, at will, right?
Correct.
You can be fired for any reason or no reason at all in most states, if I understand the employment laws correctly. How do you get around that? Like, how do you?
You don't. This is America.
So the employer just loses out on talent, and the employee goes somewhere else.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's something, I mean, think about even companies are being reviewed, right? Glassdoor is a thing where people will actually go before they even look at a job once they look at a job, they'll go to Glassdoor and see all the reviews by your previous employees, by your current employees. And people are actually using that to say, you know what, might not be the place I want to work.
Yeah.
So those things are becoming more and more apparent for more people.
This idea of, you know, I'm going to stay at a company for 40 years and, you know, walk home with a ring and a fruitcake is over.
Yeah. And I think as we start to see this Gen Z, right, Gen Z start to come up more and more. And, you know, someone made a good point. There's more people take their spots. Yes, but Gen Z has a whole different way of viewing things now, that some of them don't want to work unless they're getting the things they want to work with, how they want to work. So we're starting to see that.
It's not even that. It's how they treat their employees. Why do you need me to come in? Because I said so. I don't want to work for someone like that. I mean, who does?
Yeah.
Right? You've got to have a reason.
Yeah.
And if you've got a good reason, people will be excited to come in.
Yeah. And here's a good thing, right? And I do a lot of, this goes back to my DEI, right, hat. I'm going to put that back on. But when you have input from your clients, when you're not a hierarchical type of company, where you're getting feedback from your employees on how to build, when you're listening to your customers on how to build, those companies are more successful. Those companies have better ROI across the board in every area than if you are just mandating things to your employees. And I mentioned this to you and Jared, is I'm speaking at ILTACon in a session where one law firm said, you know what, do we just mandate all of our employees to come back, or do we actually ask the different teams, how do you want to work? How do you want to work? What's the best way? And if you're choosing remote, what's the best way to make sure the productivity and that we're meeting our goals?
I know we're going to run out of time, but it's also an emphasis of class systems, specifically within law firms, where a firm mandates that people be in office, and because subordinates who are lower in the class system that are not the attorneys are going to show up because they were told to, and then their attorneys do not. I mean, this is an instant way to destroy culture, right? Because they are beholden to a different set of rules than everybody else, and there is no consequence. I'll share one bit of advice that I'll give all job seekers. It's a great bit of advice. Don't ask on interviews what the in-office policies are. What you need to ask is, how are they enforced? Because policies don't mean a damn thing right now. The enforcement of them is what actually matters. Because what you will find is a lot of people say, these are our policies, but nobody's checking, man. As long as you're here on Wednesdays, which are our anchor day, if you're not in on Monday or Friday and you tell your manager, nobody's going to say, boo, you're not going to get fired, right? You'll get a lot of that under the table kind of conversation from employers because they know how difficult it is to enforce these mandates. So enforcement is more important than policy right now when you're investigating opportunity.
And there's a comment, there is a question, wasn't it a mandate that created this remote opportunity? But what people don't realize is remote work was actually already, and Jared, you could speak to this more, remote work was already increasing and on demand way before this mandate went into place in 2020.
100%. And keep in mind, that's a tough argument to make because it was a health mandate. You know, it's different now. But you're right. You've lit Pandora, you know, you've opened Pandora's box, you've lit fire out of the box. And look, I started my company in 2010, fully remote. And I said this to my staff the other day. This was very deliberate for two reasons. One, I wanted to save the costs on the overhead, which there's a whole real estate conversation we could have. Let's not. And the second of which is I knew that by the time I got into the growth of my business, I would be at a place where I wanted to have the flexibility to have kids and be able to pick them up at school. And those things were going to be important to me. So I needed to establish this culture in my business now. And then that permissiveness ripples culturally from the top down to everyone that's on my organization. It's in my organization. But look, people that are 20 years senior to me, they weren't thinking that way in their 20s and 30s the way I was about planning for a remote lifestyle in order to spend more time with their children, because that's not the life they lived.
Yeah.
It wasn't an option when they were in their 20s and 30s. So why would they even consider that as a future state that is better for business and better for employee satisfaction? It's pretty novel. And it may take generational overturn at the top for us to see top-down change affected at a macroeconomic level on this topic.
One more question. Is the use of cameras growing on camera for remote work for the entire workday? I am not sure about that one. It's a good question.
For meetings, yes. I don't think people, when they're not in conversation, are being monitored on camera with regularity now. Maybe doc review attorneys, but I can't speak to that.
Yeah.
I actually keep score.
I'm failing if that's the case.
All right, we're just going to rip through these real quick.
Yes.
Why are these numbers important? Why do I always talk about speed of hire? I just wanted to draw attention to this because it goes back to that first bullet point that I talked about. 92% of candidates are accepting the first offer they receive, right? Well, this is the timeline for how long it takes searches to get done. If your timeline takes longer than this, you're probably going to lose a candidate to another offer, particularly as the market heats up. So these are the numbers you should think about. If you use speed as an interview advantage as a hiring manager and say, well, I know at 45 days, they're going to have other offers. So I'm going to get my interview process done in 30. 92% of people accept the first offer that they get over the last like several months. So be the first offer that they get. Chances are they will take it. So that's why this speed is so important and critical to hiring managers to understand. Next.
Good advice.
Thank you. These have not changed. We're essentially at the same salary rates that we were Q4 of last year. Next. These have not changed. We are essentially at the same rates that we were Q1 of this year. Next. This is really interesting, right? So it hasn't changed that much, but what you'll see is that essentially in Q1 of 2023, it's like 100% remote hybrid, right? Contracting now is actually almost more than half of the market, which was in line with what we predicted. We actually predicted more. We predicted like 70%. There's still going to be a lot of 50-50 contract versus full-time, contract versus full-time. What we expect will change is more people are going to be willing to take contracts in order to get into organizations where they can't get in any other way. And the corporate e-discovery marketplace is a really good example of that. Lots of corporations are starting as contract and intend to go contract to hire. So if you're looking to break into corporate, having an open mind about that could be critical. Again, very little 5 days a week. You can see it's almost impossible. And then again, 96% we're seeing, are hybrid or fully remote. Quick guidance for out of work job seekers in ESI. Be careful about getting resume advice from generalists because it is often counterintuitive to what hiring managers in e-discovery are really looking for. Meaning, e-discovery managers want to see a chronology, they want highlights at the top, and they want your technology skills clearly articulated. A lot of people will write these long paragraph executive summaries. No one's going to read that stuff, guys. That may be what corporate America looks at a broad level, but that is not what e-discovery managers want. Speak to truth and put the important stuff in bullet points at the top.
So just to be clear on that point, Jared, so identify your skills. What do you know about collections, about processing, about review, about production?
And put your resume in chronology. A lot of people are saying, hey, here's all my talents. Here's all the things I know. Here's all my skills. Here's a whole first page. And then I'm like, but where do you work? And then they've listed like all the places that they work. And I'm like, okay, well, thanks for telling me all the things that you're great at. but when did you do them? Because when you did them is relative to how qualified you might be for my job, right? So I see a lot of candidates were having to redo resumes because they're telling everybody what they know instead of what they've done and when they've done it. That's the note. The interview, the quality and caliber of your interview has more to do with you getting the job than the quality and caliber of your talents. So this idea that like my skill set's going to speak for itself, my references will speak for me is insane. You have to be good at interviewing. If you don't interview well, someone else will get the job who may not be as talented as you are because they interview better. This is critical. And hiring managers are being much more critical about performance on interviews than they used to be.
And
Finally,
I've got some add-on advice there. If you
yeah,
are not always looking for a job, interviewing is a skill. Reach out to your recruiter, practice your interviews. Go on interviews for jobs that you don't even want, just to practice. Do that, and you will become a better interviewer. An interviewee, sorry.
and I know we're at the hour, so I'm happy to stick around and take a few more questions, Mike.
Yeah, let's go over a couple of, since we still have a nice group, we still over 78 people on the call. Let's just keep going until, let's drive through.
Great.
Okay.
What do we got? Questions?
Any questions? Let's see. I don't think we have any questions. Is there anything else from the slide deck we want to share this month?
I don't think so. I think that's it. True's got some big news coming, so stay tuned. We'll probably announce it by the time we do our session in July, but it is something that hopefully will address some of these concerns about interview performance.
Awesome. And then Mike, we've got some big news that was shared this week too.
We do. Micro courses.
Yeah.
You want to
expand on that?
No, you can do it better than I can.
ACEDS launched micro courses this week. So in addition to our training programs, our certificate programs, and our certification, which we're going to be working on some stuff with Jared and his team on going forward. But in addition to that, you can now take 30-minute, 90-minute courses, just like you can do anywhere else, to expand your knowledge on various areas like forensics, finances, that all affect or impact you as an e-discovery or a business professional in general. So really good news. Head to our website. All the information is there. So that's good for you. We are back next month. And in between that, Jared shares his true trends with us. So make sure to catch up on those. So that's always a good way for you to catch up on what additional analytics that him and his team are putting together. And then I think next month we're going to talk data privacy, possibly, right? I think that's one of the areas where we want to start seeing where e-discovery and data privacy are kind of coming together.
Not only are they coming together, but I think that there's some spiraling opportunity for professionals in e-discovery to go create niche opportunity for themselves in privacy, specifically around data mapping, which is becoming now a massive undertaking in corporate America, particularly around privacy, but just in general for governance purposes. And e-discovery professionals have very much aligned skill sets and even technological exposure to inherit the earth in that vertical.
Awesome. All right, we will see you then. Pete, I've got your question for next month and we'll catch up on that. The micro courses, we do have some free, some of them small fees for all of them, but there are some discounts coming because don't forget ACEDS has its summer sale coming up in July. So stay tuned for that as well. See you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.